It's currently 10:29 in the morning where I'm at, and I am rushing to get this audio done. But when I tell you I have been experiencing a wide, and I do mean wide range of emotions since I finished Act 3, 4 in the morning, as Arcane's finale was filled with highs on top of highs, a couple lows, and some things that I didn't even know I wanted.
You ever wish you could just stay in one moment?
Sometimes taking a leap forward means leaving a few things behind.
I just know all the time bomb shippers are going crazy right now. And look, I wanted to record this video as soon as I finished Act 3, but I just couldn't do it. The amount of rage that I had on my initial first watch of the ending was just sky high, like a prime Kratos couldn't even compete with the amount of anger I had. But I went to sleep, came back, and rewatched the ending, only for me to realize that the ending was actually kinda peak. And not only do I think Arcane's ending stuck the landing, which is such a rare thing nowadays, I truly believe that if Riot can keep up this type of quality with the rest of the up and coming League of Legends shows, they might go down as the greatest animated franchise in history, surpassing some of the greatest animated shows like Avatar or even the movies like Spider-Verse. And look, you might call it recency bias, you might call it glazing, but I call it good old-fashioned optimism. So without wasting any more time, let's get into these last 3 episodes, because in typical Arcane Season 2 fashion, there was a lot going on. So episode 7 was great for a lot of reasons, but mainly because it's centered around Ekko. It never ceases to amaze me that in a fandom where people argue about so many different things, the most common thing that almost everyone agrees on is that Ekko is borderline perfect. My guy isn't morally gray, he doesn't have all these questionable actions, he literally just lives up to his name of the boy savior, or as I like to call him, the MVP, because he was going crazy in Act 3. The fact that Ekko was just constantly saving the day on multiple different occasions just goes to show why he will always be a darling in the Arcane community, especially when you remember the fact that he's one of the youngest characters in the entire show. Like, how is it that this kid can get it right but the adults can't? Episode 7 shows us what happened to Ekko, Heimerdinger, and Jayce once they were touched by the Arcane, and while J-Man Jayce was sent to an apocalyptic version of Piltover, Ekko and Heimerdinger were both sent to an alternate version of Zaun, one where life is much happier, because in this timeline the heist that Vi and her siblings tried to run went wrong. Whereas Vi ended up dying, everyone else ended up surviving. We got to see an adult version of Milo and Clagger, which I thought was so cool because I just always wondered what they would have been like if they had actually survived. In this timeline, Benzo was never killed off, and probably most shocking of all, Vander and Silco were still alive and somehow became friends again. Ekko ends up taking the consciousness of the Ekko in this timeline, and he freaks out to find out that there is no Jinx in this timeline. Because Powder never had a falling out with her sister, she never lost herself and she never went with Silco. And after what happened at the end of episode 6, all I wanted to see was a happy Jinx. So at least if it's in a different timeline, I'll still take it. And I honestly didn't think that a highlight of Act 3 was gonna be a love dynamic between Ekko and Powder, but boy was I wrong. Because this was great. This was tugging at all the emotions. And seeing Ekko and Powder genuinely just being happy together and living life really showed how unfortunate their situations are in the other timeline. Because I think we as the audience forget sometimes that a lot of the characters that we follow in Arcane are really young, and they've had to live through some of the most traumatic experiences that any kid or young adult could go through. So to see how these small decisions just affected their lives so much is just insane to see. But it makes you appreciate what could have been for these characters, and what characters like Ekko are actually fighting for. And yeah, I know this scene just had all the fans kicking their feet. Ekko does end up finding Heimerdinger, and with the help of Powder, the three work on creating a way back to their timeline. In the process of doing this though, they end up creating Ekko's Z Drive, which is something that I was heavily anticipating. And something that I really liked about this episode is just how much it highlighted how smart Ekko and Powder really are. Because I feel like when people talk about smart characters in Arcane, they always bring up Jayce or Viktor and of course Heimerdinger, but I feel like these two oftentimes get overlooked, even though they really have insane feats of intelligence. The fact that Jinx can make all these deadly weapons out of literal garbage is something that people always overlook, on top of the fact that we've seen on multiple occasions that she can set traps and outsmart people. Or if you look at Ekko, a young kid who can literally build an entire thriving society. It's just crazy how people don't talk about how smart these two characters are, so it was really cool that it was showed off in this episode, especially since these people don't even have formal educations like people like Jayce. But thanks to Heimerdinger, he's able to upgrade their research to make a portal to send them back to their timeline. But midway through, it starts to malfunction, and in a most unexpected moment, Heimerdinger jumps off the portal and sacrifices himself to send Ekko back to his timeline. And don't get me wrong, it was impactful, but I do think it would have hit a little bit harder if we had gotten more scenes of Ekko and Heimerdinger really showing that teacher-pupil relationship, which is kind of the problem with only having 9 episodes in the season and having so many different plots going on. Because I do think the show makes it very obvious that Heimerdinger cares for Ekko and views him as his student, but I don't think you would get this sad about Heimerdinger sacrificing himself unless you just really like Heimerdinger as a character. Now moving on to Jayce, Buddy was just going through it. When he first reappeared at the end of episode 5, I genuinely thought his leg injury was because he was in some type of battle. Just for me to find out that this man slipped and fell with his hammer falling on him and then he just fell in a ditch, which in retrospect is probably the most Jayce answer we could have ever gotten. But after a week of fans bashing Jayce for what he did in episode 6, I think we can all agree he was right, because seeing what Piltover turned into after Hextech just shows that no matter how good Viktor's intentions were, they were only going to lead to something bad. After realizing what Hextech will do to the world, Jayce ends up running into this hobo of a wizard again, and he gives Jayce the chance to go back to his timeline and change everything. Now moving on, Viktor as a character felt really interesting to me throughout these last couple episodes, because it felt like his character really went from 0 to 100 from episode 6 to episode 9. Because mind you, in Act 2, he was literally running a peaceful sanctuary where violence wasn't even allowed, you couldn't even bring weapons in, and he was literally telling the doctor that even though he knew he wasn't going to live long, he would not take Vander's blood to stabilize himself because he valued his life as a human. But after Jayce came in and laid him out, he just said forget all that. This man not only started controlling people like puppets, he had a full-on villain makeover. And probably the craziest part, he teamed up with Ambessa to wage war on Piltover. And look, I'm not saying this is something that I couldn't see Viktor doing, I'm just saying it's kind of crazy how fast it happened. Like if they had been building up to it all season, I could see that, but for most of the season, Viktor was on this I'm peaceful, I want to help people kick. But it wasn't until episode 6 that he had this revelation that he lost faith in humanity and that he has to force his way of helping people on people, which was just kind of weird to me because Jayce was the only one that did something to him. Maybe if his peaceful sanctuary was attacked by enforcers and they killed a bunch of people, I could understand his logic of I've lost faith in humanity, but Jayce was the only one that did anything to him, so I was just sitting back looking at the show thinking, why does everyone have to suffer because of Jayce? Now, moving on, Mel has never been my favorite character in Arcane. I never thought she was a bad character by any means, but I felt like a lot of stuff that she had going on was just really boring compared to the other storylines. But the writers sure did fix that in this act, because we find out that the reason that the Black Rose is so interested in Mel is because she, like them, is also a mage. Which is honestly a crazy last minute pull from the writers, but it honestly worked. Mel agrees to work with the Black Rose to take down her mother, as we know that Ambessa is planning on invading Piltover. And like I said, I never really found Mel's storylines that interesting, but I did find her dynamic with her mother to be super interesting. Because in these scenes where we get Mel pleading with her mother not to cause a war in Piltover, saying that they can just go on their shifts and that she'll leave with them, you could see it's like Ambessa's getting pulled from two different sides. One side is her being a mother needing to care for her child and wanting to be there for her child. And the other side is her being that strong warrior, that ruthless general that needs to do this in order to accomplish her goal and defeat her enemies. And even though she's conflicted from two different sides, she always ends up picking the warrior. It's just such an interesting take on the ruthless parent trope, because it's pretty rare that you get a character that's as ruthless as Ambessa that still cares for their child like how she cares for Mel. Now let's talk about Jinx, because the last time we saw her, she had to watch her adopted little sister blow herself up, which is just trauma on top of trauma. It's said by Caitlyn that after the explosion, Jinx rushed Vi to a doctor and then she turned herself in. And when we see her in the cell, she is just done with life, dirty, hasn't been eating, hair all over the place, which is kind of what I expected to happen. I saw a lot of people saying that if Isha really died, then Jinx is going to go back to the crazy Jinx from season 1. But I think a lot of people were really glossing over the fact that ever since season 2 started, Jinx hasn't wanted to live for a while now. You saw how accepting she was to die when she was fighting Vi. And the only thing that was really pulling her out of that was Isha. So when Vi comes to free Jinx out of her cell, Jinx realizes that as long as she's alive, her sister will never give up on her. And not wanting to be the curse that she believes she is anymore, she traps her sister in the cell and then plans to take her life. Thankfully though, my boy Ekko comes in once again to show why he is the best character, saving the day. And look, I'm not trying to sound insensitive here, like I know this was supposed to be a serious moment, but was I the only one that thought this scene was funny? Like Ekko just kept rewinding over and over and over again. Every time he tried to plead with Jinx to save her, she wasn't trying to hear any of that. I was getting major Life is Strange flashbacks from this moment. Now as far as Vi and Kate, surprisingly they didn't really have that much going on in Act 3. Outside of them preparing and fighting to defend Piltover, they didn't really have anything else going on. But we did get a wild jail cell scene, so I guess somebody's day got made. Now let's talk about this final battle because so much stuff happened and this was actually where the peak cinema came in. One thing I can really applaud Arcane for is the fact that it never feels like the good guys are just safe. Throughout this entire battle, it felt like anyone could die at any moment. People were dropping like flies, and for a majority of the battle, Piltover was losing and losing badly. And one of the craziest moments that had me screaming at the screen was when Maddie betrayed the enforcers and revealed that she was working for Ambessa, because I know there were so many people who hated her character for that scene with Caitlyn, and they were coming up with any reason to hate her, and they were saying that she was a spy, that she was manipulating Caitlyn, that she worked for Ambessa. So to see it actually become true was just a crazy moment. But I think my favorite moment had to be Ekko and Jinx pulling up with the entire Undercity in a sky blimp just to even out the odds. Kate and Mel's fight with Ambessa was way better than I actually thought it was gonna be, and I kind of like the idea that Kate lost an eye to get Mel an opening to take down Ambessa. It just made things feel a lot more realistic to me, given how skilled of a fighter Ambessa is. Now if I'm being honest, as cool as it was to see Jinx and Vi fighting together, I really wasn't all that interested in seeing them fight Warwick again. It just really wasn't that interesting, especially when you throw in the fact that Vi versus Warwick was just a better fight overall. And yes, once again, I just have to point out how much of an MVP Ekko was for his fight against Viktor. Now the battle ultimately ended with Jayce getting into Viktor's consciousness and showing him what the world will look like if he actually goes through with his plans. It's then revealed that this bum wizard that we had been seeing this entire time was just Viktor from the future. And y'all thought I was lying in my Act 1 review when I said he was the Lord of the Bums. But it turns out that Viktor sent Jayce back to stop himself, as he's ran every single possibility to make his plans work, and every time it always ends with the world in chaos. Viktor, realizing this, tells Jayce to leave as he plans to destroy everything that he's done. But Jayce chooses to stay, telling Viktor that they're going to finish this together. Which, I mean, I guess is noble, but if I had a magical baddie at home named Mel, I don't think I would have did this. And once Viktor starts the process, everybody ends up getting freed and Jayce and Viktor die, which I guess is a pretty poetic ending for the two partners that wanted to change the world. Now let's talk about this final Jinx and Vi moment, because this is what had me enraged 4 o'clock in the morning. So once everyone is freed from Viktor's control, Jinx and Vi end up falling on two different ledges. And while Jinx ends up falling on a ledge by herself, Vi ends up falling on a ledge with Warwick. Now the ledge is already unstable and there is a 300-pound wolf man on the side of Vi. So Jinx, like a sane person, screams at Vi, telling her to jump to the other ledge so that she doesn't fall to her death, because literally she was 5 steps away from being safe. But no, Vi doesn't do that. Instead, she chooses to start crying and then grabs Warwick's face and starts caressing him. And then of course he wakes up and then tries to attack Vi. But before he can attack Vi, Jinx tackles Warwick, knocking him off the ledge, but in the process of tackling him, he grabs Jinx, pulling her down with him. And as Vi's holding Jinx's arm, trying to keep her from falling, Jinx realizes that Vi can't save her, so she pulls the Hextech core out of her gauntlet. And as Jinx and Warwick are falling down, we see Jinx pull out one of her hand grenades, and then we cut to a big explosion. Now, if I'm going to be 100% honest with y'all, I hated this the first time I watched it. First off, they have a lot of Vi defenders online right now saying stuff like, you can't blame Vi for this wasn't her fault, that's her dad, you can't expect her to not act like this. And look, I understand all that, but it's a time and place thing. Nobody's saying that Vi can't grieve, but it's the stupidity in the moment. She's literally on a ledge that is shaking more and more by the minute while her sister is screaming, just jump to the ledge, you can make it. And the thing that makes it so stupid is she literally could have made it. She was 5 steps away from safety. So Jinx having to come in and sacrifice herself was so unnecessary. And it's a really dumb concept when you think about the fact that Jinx didn't have some lesson about learning to sacrifice for other people that she needed to do, because Jinx, the whole reason she was there in the first place was to help Vi. There was just nothing about this that I liked, and it wasn't even the fact that they killed Jinx off, because like I said in my Act 1 prediction video, I said that I thought Jinx was gonna die by the end of the series, even though a lot of people were saying, well, she can't technically die because she's in the League of Legends game. But I just felt like the way the story was going, that's what it was going to lead to. So killing her off wasn't the problem for me, it was the way in which it was done. Why did it have to be because Vi lost all of her brain cells in one moment? And man, I was so mad when I first watched this. Like, I'm telling you, I jumped out of bed, I was pacing around the room like it was not a good sight. But after I calmed down, I went to sleep, I rewatched the ending over again, and now my opinion's a little bit different, because one of the things that makes Arcane such a great show is that if you can pick up on the subtle hints, little things become a lot bigger. Because I'm here to tell you, not only is Jinx alive, but we actually saw her one last time before the episode ended. Because yes, there was an explosion, but nowhere in the series did we actually see that Jinx died, or did anyone say that she died. Which on its own might not mean much, but here's where it gets interesting. At the end of the episode, we get a scene of Caitlyn looking at the layout of the building where the battle took place, and she's specifically looking at the area where Jinx and Vi were. Now we also see that in her hand she's holding the top of the hand grenade that Jinx used when she quote unquote blew herself up. Caitlyn then zooms in a little bit more on the layout, and we then see that the camera shows that there were actually air ducts connected to the very same area where Jinx was falling at. Air ducts that Jinx quite literally could have used to escape. And you might be asking yourself, well, how could she be able to escape? A lot of people forget that Jinx has Shimmer, and it allows her to move way faster than the average person. And every time that Jinx uses Shimmer, there's a little purple trail. Now, I just thought I was coping at first, but somebody pointed out to me that if you look back at the explosion, there's actually a purple trail that happens before the explosion actually comes. Let me slow it down just a little bit for y'all. And from the layout that Caitlyn shown, this would be in the same direction of those air ducts that Jinx could have used to escape. Now, if you don't believe me, there's one more bit of evidence that I have to show that Jinx is still alive. At the very end of the episode, there's a scene where we get a blimp flying away over the sea. Now, it's never said who's actually flying in the blimp, but if you don't remember episode 1 of Arcane, let me play this clip to jog your memory.
One day, I'm gonna ride in one of those things.
So knowing the fact that Jinx has superhuman speed, knowing the fact that every time she uses it you can see a purple trail, seeing the purple trail before the explosion even goes off, knowing that there were air ducts exactly where Jinx was falling at, and knowing that Jinx always wanted to fly on one of these airships. Not to mention at the very end of the episode, the end that the show gives you is in the signature Jinx glitch art style. Without a shadow of a doubt, there is no way that Jinx isn't alive at the end of Arcane.
But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
No, but in all seriousness, after realizing this, I realized how amazing Arcane's ending actually was. Because some people will say that it's bad writing that Jinx didn't die and that she didn't learn her lesson, but in all actuality, if you really go back to the scene where she was in the cell and she was thinking that she was talking to Silco, Silco told her to break the cycle, sometimes you just need to walk away. Jinx took that as offing herself, but what if she quite literally just walked away? She helped her sister, she faked her death, and now she's leaving Zaun and Piltover to live a life somewhere else. It's actually a pretty great ending, honestly. But now that season 2's finished, I can honestly say Arcane is one of my favorite shows of all time. I mean, this show was so good, I was literally thinking about playing League of Legends. I mean, how crazy is that? I think this show really pushed animation towards a great space, and it'll probably go down as one of the most influential animated series of all time. There was just so much passion and love put into every single frame of this project that I don't really see a lot of shows being able to beat out. And it was really just an incredible experience being able to watch both seasons on a weekly basis. But let me know how y'all feel about Act 3 of Arcane and how y'all feel about season 2 as a whole. Did it live up to the expectation? Do you think it underperformed? I love all y'all for checking out another video, and until then, it's been your boy Corin, and I'm off this.